What is up, guys and gals? Welcome back to Weekly Indie Newcomer, the weekend series where you and I hang out for a little bit and play an indie game that's been bouncing around on my hard drive over the course of the last week or so. This week, we are taking a look at Thea, the Awakening, which is basically, it's very, very difficult to describe, but if you took a 4X and you stripped it down a whole bunch and simplified it, and then mixed it with a roguelike, that's what you would have right here. So Thea, the Awakening is a game that has a tremendous amount of variability, but very, very different every single time you play. I have my minor quibbles with the game, but those are all based on my own personal bias, and so I'll tell you about that later when we get to the end. If you wanted to get my thoughts on the game, you should jump to the end of the video. I will annotate it right here so that you can jump straight to my thoughts and just get a feel for it if you just wanted like a 1.5 minute rundown. But nevertheless, I always feel like when I look for games and I want to see if I want to purchase them, I always go watch somebody else play them. I don't go watch reviews. I go watch a Let's Play or something so that I can get a real idea of what the game plays like, and I feel like that's the best thing that I can do for you as well as a viewer. So without further ado, I don't want to beat around the bush too much or talk too much. So Thea, the Awakening, let's get started, shall we? This game is going to be, I'm a little bit stripped bare right now. The reason being is that I only play this game on my laptop, and so unfortunately I didn't have the hog power required in order to record it on my laptop, so you will unlock these heroes over here, and in fact it's a little bit different though. I think it's randomized at the beginning. In my laptop game, I started with Veles and I started with Mokosh, whereas this time around I've started with Svarog and I've gotten to Zarya. Now essentially you're choosing a god who's going to represent your people as you play the game. It gives you their little description over here. Feel free to pause and check that out. Every single one of them is responsible for something else. So this lady is the one of morning and evening stars, whereas this guy is the god of sun and heavenly fire, which sounds pretty dope to me, so I'm going to go with that. As you level up gods, so as you play the game more and more and more, you will get XP every single time that you lose, and that's how the game progresses. Your gods will get stronger and stronger and stronger as you fail at the game and don't make it very far, but have no fear, I've actually made it really, really far without any upgraded gods. I tried it out when I first started the game. I failed my first run, and then my second run I felt like I had a really good grasp of how the game played, and it still hasn't ended. I've played for probably 4 or 5 hours in one game, and nothing's really gone wrong after that. I'm doing pretty well. The difficulties do scale up. I mean, you can play on whichever one you want. Normal seems to be about right for me. There is some RNG involved in this game, as there is with any roguelikes, but what I like about the RNG is that you still have some kind of limited damage control over it, whereas a lot of roguelikes just leave you out in the cold when it comes to RNG. This game actually gives you a chance to sort of fiddle with it and fix it or minimize the damage, which I like a lot. The god of sun and heavenly fire, first son of Perun, when the darkness came, it almost took your life, filling your very being with its curse. But you held on to life and fell down to Thea to protect those of your worshippers who still lived. Providing small rays of sunshine and warmth for as long as you could, you ensured their safety. On paper, oh man, they took it away from me. I'm gonna skip the tutorial. There's lots of spoken dialogue in this game, which actually really, really surprised me for a game that was made by a relatively small developer, and it really, I was stoked about it. I was like, oh my god, this is all voiced and everything. Lots of dialogue in this game, lots of reading, lots of lore. The whole thing is based on Eastern folklore, and so you're going to have things like Rizulkas, you're going to have all kinds of random monsters running around. I've actually always been fascinated with Eastern folklore, and so Eastern European folklore, anyways, to be more specific. You don't want to go too far east, because then we won't be talking about the same thing, but this is how the game plays, right here. This is the entire game. Let's run through the UI, and I'll talk about the things that we have to pay attention to. So, first things first, up in the right-hand corner, there's the number of people in this little expedition right here. You always start with a city and an expedition. Think of expeditions as the actual characters that you are playing, whereas the city is your base of operations where you will rest, resupply, and then go back out to adventure some more. There's nobody really playing against you in this, and so don't get like a Civ idea from it. There's no other cities around that I've found that are like playing against you or anything like that. It's just your city, and you're kind of like the last ones that remain on like a big destroyed Earth, and now you're rebuilding medieval society. And so up here, you've got how many people are in your party, you've got how far you can move in hexes, you got how many turns worth of food the expedition has left, how many campfire woods they have left. You have to have campfire wood in order to restore health after you get into fights and stuff like that, otherwise it doesn't count, and the amount of weight that they can carry. If you click on anything twice, it'll give you this lovely little rotational contextual menu, and you've got equipment, where every single one of the characters in your 6-man party has their own equipment that they put on. It has all kinds of different values. It's not going to be inside the breadth of what we can cover right now, what everything does, but I'll try and touch at it. I guess I'll try and touch on it as we go along, but there's a lot of ground to cover here, and so I really feel like this is going to be a tough game for me to review in 30 minutes, you know, or to do an impressions video of in 25 minutes. But anyways, everybody's customizable. You can put gear all over them if you want it. As you adventure, you'll get better gear for each one of them, and you can specialize them to do different stuff. Every single time you play the game, you get different characters with different names, different random equipment. You can start with super good equipment, super bad equipment. It just sort of depends. Sometimes you just don't get what you want. They have a weight allotment down here which dictates what they can carry. This guy is a medic, this lady is a craftsman, and these four are warriors based on their little things over here. That's right, there's crafting, there's building, there's all kinds of random stuff in this game, and every time you think you've got it figured out, the game gets a little bit more complicated and there's like a new thing that you have to learn about. And so anyways, it's a game with a lot of depth. Other things in the UI, we've got our research points. Every time you do an event, you get research points. That allows you to unlock new buildings for your base and also new technologies like swords, weapons, things of that nature that you can craft. You've got your XP. Every time that maxes out, all of your citizens level up and get new stats. And so they get much, much better at just random stuff. I mean, it sort of depends. Every character has like 20 stats that you got to keep an eye on. So it can get a little overwhelming sometimes, but it's still a very, very cool game. This stuff down here just shows resources or hides resources so that you can see what's on each of the hexes. The expedition can go out and they can camp on a hex and they can harvest from it for a couple of turns if you're low on stuff. But at the beginning of the game, the first thing we need to do is click on our society. And we need to go to this little tab up here for production. And so every city sits in a location where it can provide you with stuff. And we have pretty bad gatherers. That's not going to be good. We started with really, really bad gatherers in our town. And so none of them have a skill of 5 or higher, which is ugly. And we only started with 1 craftsman. So this is crafting ability and this is gathering ability right here. Slava, I guess I'll have her go with wood. I mean, that's a little bit troublesome because you do need a lot of wood in this game, Giggity, in order to make sure that you can craft all the stuff that you want. Our other gatherer is going to have to go in on food, but I mean, we only get 16 units of food. We have 10 people, and so we eat 10 food a turn, which means that we're definitely losing food right now. And so if we could find somebody else to gather, this would actually be a start that I would re-roll just because we kind of got iffy stuff right here, and it looks like we may starve. I'm not a huge fan of it, but we do have children. So in our city's inventory, we've got kids. Kids are counted as chattel in this game. And so anyways, eventually they'll grow up. And once they grow up, they'll be, why don't you just grow up? We'll be able to turn them into whatever we want, be it workers, fighters, or producers. And so I'll probably turn them both into workers so that we can really start pumping out wood and food really well, since those are the first things you want to look after. With our little expedition, let's take our first turn and have a look around. Got chicken harvesting over here, but what I'm interested in is adventuring, treasure, and hives. And so there's a couple things you want to look for on the map. The first thing we want to do is we want to explore a little bit, and there's going to be areas called hives that constantly spawn monsters that will come and attack your city over and over and over again. When you destroy the hives, you limit the amount of attacks that you've got to field, and since the people back in your city tend to be not very good fighters, they tend to be craftsmen and things of that nature, you can get yourself into a little bit of trouble there. I'm going to leave... Actually, it'd be a smarter idea if I went back to town and got a fighter to bring with us. Let's do that. So there's one fighter left in town that we didn't bring with us, and he's there as a guard. We can click on the town, and we can collapse them into the settlement. What we'll need to do now is we need to reform another expedition because that disbanded them. So the people that I want to have a medic, otherwise healing becomes a little bit sketchy. Nadeha... She's got, or Nadija, or however you say her name. You know what, they'll be fine back in town. We'll protect them. So I'm going to bring all these guys. I'm going to drag and drop them into the battle group. And while some people probably wouldn't recommend doing this, these 3 will probably be fine. They all come with decent weapons, and they all come with decent equipment. So I think if anything goes wrong, they should be fine. We also need to equip the expedition with a little bit of food, or you can move weapons around if you so desire. How heavy is that shield? 98. Where is the medic? Medic, where are you? That's not who I wanted. I need one of these people over here. Not an Ostoya. Expedition 1. Well, anyways. This should be... Why is it lighting up the people in town? It should be lighting up these people right here. Weird. So anyways, what should be happening right now is when I go into this menu, it should still have their portraits right here, and it should have all the equipment on this side. And unfortunately, it looks like it's not doing that right now. We'll worry about it a little bit later. We don't need the equipment anyways. I'm going to drag and drop some food in here. I'm going to give them... You need 1 food per person per day. And so I'm going to go with 70 food. That'll give them 10 turns. We don't have a lot of firewood around, so I'm going to leave it alone. And we'll create that expedition. Nope, we're not going to be healing anytime soon, and then we're going to go get this treasure over here. And so if you needed to grab your expedition, sometimes it can be difficult to select between the expedition and the city when they're sitting on top of each other. Just click on this little button over here. I promise it'll be alright. And so since they wasted a turn in town, that sucks a little bit, but not much I can do there. They're traveling over hard terrain, which means it's going to take them a turn or two to get over to here. Forests take 3, mountains take 3, rough places take 2, and then flatland tends to take 1, but since we've got some troubles right now. Did we get research? Oh, good. We got our research done. So things you can pick with research. You can choose to allow yourselves to use different materials when you craft. And so as it stands right now, if you have these things, that's perfectly fine, but we can't gather them. So when we get to nodes, we just don't have the expertise required in order to gather some of these things. You start out with basics like wood and iron and twine and things like that. But in general, when I first start out, I usually take weapons first so I can start mass-producing weapons. You'll find a lot of weapons along the way, but sometimes I just really need a one-hander and I need to make it right now. So I tend to do that, or the even better decision is to go in on one of these construction projects over here. We started with the pasture, which allows us to get free food every turn. It also allows us to, I think, have a chance of randomly recruiting new villagers. You also have a chance to find babies or something out in the field, but I think that's with the cabbage field, because the babies arrive wrapped in cabbages or something. So anyways, we're not actually going to be able to build this for a little while, so I'm going to stay away from it. Let's take gathering steel first, maybe, or gathering darkwood might be good. Honestly, any of these might be kind of useful. Spider silk could be pretty good, too. Let's take spider silk. So we get 5 of it for free when we spend our research. And now, when we go on the map, if we go to the resources thing, it should tell us where we can find spider silk. Although it might be... It's supposed to light up one node. There we go. So you can click on it to cycle through. It's way off to the south. So that's a little bit further out. Spider silk is a higher tier piece of equipment anyways, or crafting material. So, I'll have to worry about it a little bit later. Let's go ahead and explore. You stumble across some ruins of an old city engulfed in mist and mystery. I guess we could have just said it's mystery, but you could have spelled it like mist. You open one of the buildings, a strange-looking stone and metal built affair, and you hear a clunking noise, then a blunt thud. Before you're able to do anything, you see a skeleton charging your way. To arms, or to legs if you're especially good at kicking. So you have 1 skeleton and 4 hulking rats. To show you guys what the combat looks like, I'm going to begin it. I'm going to go on record and say that I don't like the combat in this game, but that's because I don't like card games. Card games just don't do it for me. But the card game is really, really good. So even though I don't like it, I'm willing to admit that it's a very good card game, and I'm sure people that like card games would enjoy it. I just have a really, really severe bias against card games. What you need to be aware of here: offensive hand on the left, strategic hand on the right. Strategic cards can play these abilities on them, whereas offensive cards will be going off these stats up here: health, damage, and shielding. So when they get deployed onto the game board, they get that added to their health so that they take damage from both. This over here is poison, which means she deals more damage to anything that's already been wounded. But aside from that, you also got to be aware of these little effects right here, the type of damage they deal. Piercing damage allows you to deploy in front of enemies who have already deployed before you. I'll explain that in just a minute, but allows them, more importantly, to deal half of their damage when they're deployed to the game board. And so it's actually kind of a nice thing to have. But in general, piercing damage tends to be a little bit lower than other damage types. In addition, we've got slashing damage. It's basically the default damage. It's 1 damage dealt to 1 enemy. And then there's also blunt damage, which you can see right here, which is almost kind of like tackling, I guess, in Magic the Gathering, where all of the damage she distributes has to be delegated to defenders. And so actually, this is kind of the way that you deal AoE damage if you really, really want to. You can reshuffle your hand if you want, but I'm okay with the hand that we got. It's not fantastic, but it's not terrible either, so I'll stick with it. Alright, and so we drew to get the first turn on the left-hand side. So what you want to be aware of is this little number right here determines how many cards you can deploy on a given turn. We can play 2 right now, and that can be any combination of offensive or strategic cards. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play Millibrat first. You're going to see that his 11 gets added to his HP when he drops that little shielding value that I told you. I actually shouldn't have played him first. That was stupid of me. Well, I was thinking I wanted to use the piercing damage, so it wasn't stupid, but it was ill-advised. And then I'll play her second. And so we got 2 people on the field right now. We're going to end our turn, and then they're going to get to play 2 cards. And so the opponent's going to play any combination that he wants to. He played a hulking rat, which has 8 HP and 2 damage. He played a really, really badass mob right there, but he played it from his strategic hand. And so he used an ability, it's confused right now, which means on the first turn of combat, it won't attack. Combat flows from the left to the right, so basically we take turns deploying things into kind of a stack, And then, once that's done, we end the strategic phase and we go into the fight phase, where it moves from left to right with things attacking each other at random and kind of playing abilities, and you'll see what I mean. It's very, very simple once you get the hang of it. But it's also deep enough to where you can play well or you can play badly, and it will definitely have an effect on how things go. Since he's confused on his first turn, I'm going to go ahead and drop Nyeznavui. Right there. He's going to deal 7 damage when he deploys to the card, or when he deploys to the board, because he's got piercing damage, as I mentioned before, and then once we get to combat, he'll also be able to deal 15 damage or so. I do wish that I could play 2 cards right now because I could knock him down to size, but not going to work like that. Not going to work like that. Luckily, this guy won't get to attack on his first turn, so we don't got to worry about it that badly. I do wish that there was a way to speed up the gameplay somewhere. I haven't found it yet. Some of this more experience with the game could probably tell you if there's something to make the card game play faster, but you're going to play this card game a lot, and sometimes I wish it just flowed a little quicker. We're going to play Malavid because he's going to... No, he's not. He's going to wound one of these, but he's not going to kill it. So it's down to 2 right now. You can also play a second card. And so Shield Ally allows us to take the last person in the stack and add his shielding value to them. There's also an attack version of that called Support. We can do First Action, which takes the last person on our side in our stack and makes them take the first action, which is pretty cool and it's kind of nice to use. But it's important to note that Get Closer is the one that you want to pay attention to here. Get Closer allows you to put any character onto the field of combat instantly, but they lose their first combat turn because they'll be confused. So if you have a warrior that's in your strategic stack and you wish that he was in combat, you can deploy him like that. And in fact, that's exactly what I'm going to do right here with It's Beliut. End my turn real fast. And so there's the hulking rat. They're going to drop that on in. We're playing pretty well right now. I think I would like... Well, you see this little number on the right? That's the level that you can play this on. Every card had in the bottom right corner, that's the level of the card. So unfortunately, her first action won't really play on any of our cards since they're all higher level. I'm just going to deploy her like so. And then actually, I'm going to end combat because he's our medic and I don't want him in combat at all. And so I'm just going to leave him out of combat for right now. You can end your entire strategic turn by going right here. That ends the strategic phase completely and allows the opponent to play all their cards and then start the fight. And so on fight phase 1, Millibrat's going to kill that rat right there. Nadija is going to go ahead and deal a little bit of damage to the skeleton. He's almost going to finish the job. 15 damage right there. He's also going to take 4 from the rat, which is disappointing. Malavid's going to take care of business, kill off that rat, and then phase 2 starts. Millibrat's going to finish off the skeleton. 7 damage is going to go to that rat, which is going to kill it. Nyeznavoy is going to hit him, and it's done. And that's going to be the end of combat, and that's how it plays out. You spend your turn stacking up the cards, and then you get 2 phases of combat to decimate each other. If both sides, nobody's died in the first 2 rounds of the fight, you go back to the strategic hand, and you redeploy all the cards again. The game sounds like it's complicated, but believe me, you'll get used to playing it really, really fast. You search the buildings and discover supplies, or a supply store still intact. So we got 18 food, 19 iron, which is really, really good. We got 6 malachite, which is actually kind of a copper... Can't remember if it's a copper oxide or a copper sulfide. Anyways, and then also you've got a buckler, which is actually a pretty good piece of equipment for your medics and guys like that because it's a light shield that will give them a little bit of defensive value. Nyeznavoy took 2 damage, unfortunately, which means he's going to need to rest. If their health gets too low, every single day you have a chance for the wounds to get worse or better, and so you hope that they get better. We're probably not going to camp. We got 2 XP and 1 research from finishing off that fight. Let's go ahead and have a look around the map because scouting is an important part of this game. I can see a hive up here, which I think we're going to take care of. Unfortunately, we've got hives, and it's only our first day of adventuring. Let's go to the top of this mountain. Apparently, we can go hunt raccoons if we really, really want to. Or we can go straight for the small hive, which is what I'm going to do. While we're in the vicinity, I wanted to take a look and make sure that Nyeznavoy is getting his health back. Nyeznavoy! Okay, so he got 1 of his health back. Good. Fantastic. With Radzim, I'd like him to equip this buckler, which is going to give him 6 shielding and 3 armor. That means it's going to add 3 to his health, make him a little bit stronger, I think. Maybe? Maybe not. Anyway, shielding is the value in combat. I think armor is the primary defense skill for fight challenges. It is a combination of health and equipment bonuses. And so, yeah, he should have 5 plus 3 when he goes into combat. He should have 8 HP total. And then, on top of that, let's see, actually. We can see what... Yeah, I think that's how it's going to work. It just doesn't actively update his HP right there. And then shielding is the thing when we deploy him to the game board that gives him 6 extra HP. And so, he's not very strong. He's actually pretty weak. He can only carry a buckler. But he's got to carry his killer mug of brew around. I mean, you got to stay drunk when you're in the field. It is what it is. Thea is not an easy place to grow up, but alas, grow up we must. One of your children has matured into a young adult and is ready to join your village and rebuild Thea. We can choose if he's going to be a warrior. We can choose if he or she, actually. It shows a he right here, but it's actually male or female, and you don't really know. We can make them into a medic, or we can make them into a crafter or a worker. This is actually rare. This doesn't come up very often, but we don't need a medic right now. We need workers, and so there it is. Bradomir is going to be our first new worker. So let's go ahead and go back. Since we do have a food deficit, I need Bradomir to be jumped into the production queue right now. Otherwise, our food is just not going to be good. So Bradomir is actually not that much better than the previous individual. The main guy in the stack uses his full work value, which is 10 times his resource value right here. So you'll see right there, she's deployed. She does plus 40 a day to a 60 Q. And it does carry over when it gets to the end. It doesn't wipe out the extra work. The people that are deployed into helper slots only give half of their expertise. So she would get a plus 20 from Bradomir. And so I need him over here, so he's actually producing a little bit. Actually, he added... Oh, it's because, okay. It naturally puts your best person in the first slot and the worst people in the second slots. It automatically does that for you, so nothing to worry about there. We can make the score a little bit better by leveling them up over time, or B, by giving them a thing in the crafting menu called crafting tools and gathering tools. I wanted to show you guys how crafting works in this game because I don't think I'm going to have a ton of time to do a lot of this stuff. There's so much to cover in this game that unfortunately it's hard to hit in like a 30-minute video, but we can make some clothing. And so the crafting system in this game is very, very cool. And so you can slide stuff into any of these slots. You have to have one of these in each little tier. And so on the first tier, spider silk is what we're going to go with. On the second tier, I'd say spider silk. And on the third tier, oh, it takes 4, never mind. Second tier, we'll go with string, and this is just to illustrate a point. And third tier, we'll go with string. That gives us a silk tunic. So it's worn by master craftsmen. It gives 3 armor, and it doesn't weigh very much, which is always really, really nice. It only weighs 12. Now, watch what happens when I do this right here. It becomes a plain shirt. And yes, this permutation and combination game persists throughout the entire game. When you move stuff around, it changes the type of shirt that you're creating, like from bare materials, and it also changes the stats that you'll get out. This is very, very cool, and I enjoy it tremendously. And it allows you to kind of vary around the stats and the type of item you'll get out as you play the game. So bear that in mind as you go into the future. For right now, I'm not going to use the spider silk right there. It doesn't seem to have much of a point. However, I'm just going to make a leather tunic because that'll give us +1 to dexterity, 3 armor. Doesn't weigh a lot, and we can put it on one of our characters who has no armor. So the extra 3, it's not much, but it'll help. Now what we need is for Bosikia, I don't even know how to say her name, I apologize if I butcher it, to be over to here, and it'll create that. And that's for every single item in the game. Like when you build swords, you get to choose the hilt, the pommel, the blade, the fuel that you use to fire it, and depending on what you choose, it'll give you a better or worse item. It also changes the cosmetic, and it also changes around what the item is called. Very, very cool stuff, and I like that a lot. And in fact, it's one of the big things that sold the game to me because I am a crafting fan. Let's go ahead and wipe out this hive real quick. As you approach the beasts, you have time to decide your plan of action. We can either fight them in a sickness test. There are different kinds of combats. They all involve cards. So when you fight somebody, that's one type of card game. When you do the sickness game, you have to play, I think, the intelligence card game, which is how good you are at brewing poisons and stuff like that. We have a big group full of idiots, and so I wouldn't recommend it. We're just going to fight them. There's also a tactical card game. There's a magical card game. There's a bunch of them. They all function the exact same way, but they use different stats on the cards for your characters. And so if you go into a magical combat with all fighters, they're all going to have like 2 HP and like no attack value. But if you take fighters into an actual fight, they have like 40 HP and like 20 damage. So like I said, there's lots of stats in this game to keep track of, and it will overwhelm some people. We've got a blood bee and a crazed bee. Well, I just can't let her be, so we're going to jump up in here and see who we can kill. That's a pretty solid combat hand, and one that I am not going to scoff at. We're going to keep it. All right. Opponent gets to play first, and the opponent only played... Actually, the opponent played 2 cards. That's actually good because bees use piercing attacks, which means that they get to preclude one of our characters, and on top of that, they get to deal their damage. That means that bees are very, very good at fighting first, and if they play first, it means then you can use your piercing characters to play around them, which is nice. So watch, I can actually get in front of the blood bee right now, so that when we take our first turn, he kills the blood bee, which keeps the most powerful combatant off the field. With our second card, we could confuse the bee over there, but that kind of seems like a waste to me unless... Oh yeah, you can see his card got better too. He can now shield allies instead of just having get closer. So when you equip a shield on somebody, they now get the ability to use shield ally. In fact, I may use that on him. That sounds good to me. We'll put that in right there because I think they're going to play 2 bees on the next turn, and it's going to put them both in front of the line right there. And when that happens, he's going to take a little bit of damage. Oh, maybe not. Maybe that only works for the first character. I thought they got to keep stacking them right there with piercing. So I learned something today. It's always nice when you get to learn something. I'll probably go with... Let's get Citizen Sledgy in here. She's going to be useful. As you recall, I explained that already, but blunt damage has to be distributed between defenders, and it maxes out at 2 defenders. So it should be enough to kill 2 bees at a time. If you can kill 2 bees with 1 sledgehammer, why not? In the real world, using sledgehammers on bees kind of seems like a bit of overkill, but in this game world, it actually works out pretty well. Let's keep deploying. He's going to have a ton of HP. I could have considered, if he had piercing damage, dropping him right there so he could soak damage on the first turn, but it's cool. I also wanted to add that I really like the music in this game. I mean, this game has really, really high production values. That's one of the things that really surprised me about it, in all honesty, is that it's an indie game, but the cards here look like cards from an actual card game. They look gorgeous, you know what I mean? Like, they are rendered in a way that is definitely pretty damn cool. I'll probably just play... We can play the rest of our cards, because he ran out of cards. If you're the last man standing and you still have cards left to play, you can play them all in chain at the end of the queue. But the front end typically determines how the battle goes, like the first 3 or 4 combatants. I will probably confuse a bee right here to lower damage a little bit. And then I will more than likely... Yeah, actually, let's give... It's Billiot. Let's give him the first action. So that's going to move him to the front of the queue. And so we traded our strategic card to move them to the front of the queue. This is our discard pile. It comes back in once the hand is reshuffled at the end of combat. Alright, so it's Billy. It's going to kill the first bee. He's going to kill off the blood bee, which is very important because that was the only one that could deal considerable damage to us and actually leave somebody with wounds. Dubrovna is going to go ahead and kill off the crazed bee and distribute the damage because 16 obviously isn't equal to 6. She killed off 2 bees with 1 swing. And we ended the combat just like that, so game over. Oh, never mind, there's 1 bee left. I learned a thing today. Cool, well, we've won, which is really what we signed up for. Dubrovna took 1 damage, that's not too bad. And then in destroying the hive, we got a little bit of XP and a little bit of research. So that's pretty awesome. We're actually at 11 out of 9 right now. I think that rolls over on the next turn, though, so nothing to worry about there. We still have movement. Don't forget to cash it in. Man, I like this map. I mean, this kind of sucks down in here, but it'll be good for keeping monsters away. And the rest of it is very explorer-friendly. I like that a lot. Let's go ahead and we'll call it off right there, and there's the level up. So, Expedition 1, Radzim got more strength. We got folklore over here, health on Millibrat, strength on Itzbiliut, Dubrovna, Malavid. That's good because they're all warriors. He got tactics, which is actually used in the tactical card game, so that'll be nice too. Kind of diversify our abilities a little bit. I'm going to keep scouting and see where we end up in here. Couple of hives. So our city is definitely going to get attacked if we don't take care of some of these hives before the middle to end game starts to get here. These are going to level up over time and get stronger. We got an encounter. Every single turn you've got a random chance to get an encounter, which is basically like a choose your own adventure type thing that can end in one way or another. As you make your way through the terrain, your herbalist spots an area where you can harvest some good herbs. They grow inside a hollow tree, but beware, there seems to be a lot of spider webs surrounding the place. These webs look thicker than I like. We best be about our business here, exclaims one of your men. Okay, so we can either pick herbs or we can bail out. I'm going to pick herbs. And so we got 22 herbs, and then we also got 7 cane. And so you've already picked some of the herbs, but you notice that there's a larger patch further down the path. However, that area is a sticky white blanket of webs thrown all over it. I think we'll probably walk away. Don't take risks in the early game in this game. It's not worth it. Wait till you're strong enough and you can like auto-resolve everything and then just clean up the map. If you focus, this is another beehive. We're going to go ahead and fight with it. I don't know if I could auto-resolve this. I bet we would lose somebody if I auto-resolve it. The auto-resolve is okay, but it's not that good. I'm going to reshuffle this one. And so in reshuffling my hand, I basically ended up with what I already had. That's cool. We'll keep and play. The player gets to go first, which means I want to deploy you. And then I also want to deploy... I'm going to counter a tactic. Counter tactic allows me to destroy one of the cards in their strategic hand so that they can't play it. That's what I'm going to do. So we killed off one of their bees. So we will say bees nuts to them. The reason I'm not playing for my offensive hand, I'm sure people want me to explain this, is because I have a lot of people who have piercing attacks. And I was kind of trying to wait and see until I could get an opportunity to play piercing hands a little bit more aggressively. I will probably use her... Well, let's put in somebody else with a good defensive value, I guess. Now that Millibrat's, I'm gonna wait and see what they do. I'm trying to feel this out a little bit. So yeah, they interject on your on your characters quite frequently. Millibrat, unfortunately, her first action won't work because everything's too high level for it. Okay. Well, then we'll drop... I'm just going to play this fast and hard then. I'm going to drop in Yeznevoy, even though I know it's a mistake, and I know it's bad play, but nothing you could really do about it. You know he's going to get stung by a bee, so it's like, well, what are we going to do here? I could confuse... I should have done that sooner. I could have confused the blood. I played badly. I played poorly, and that's just now becoming apparent to me, and it's really going to hurt this character. It's Billy. It's going to take some damage on this one. Sucks, but what are you going to do? So he's going to play another crazed bee. Once these level up and get a little bit nastier, you've got to be very, very careful about the way that you approach him. But for right now, it's not that bad of a combat. I don't want my medic in battle, so I'm just going to bypass the remainder of my strategic turn. Engage the fight phase. He's going to take a fat grip of damage. Yeah, I figured as much. He's going to take even more damage because that character has 4 poison, which means that deals 4 extra poison damage to anybody who's already wounded. It's bad play. I didn't play that one smartly. I should have played that one a lot differently. I didn't think they were going to play the Blood Bee first, though, which is the biggest concern. Comes 6 damage right there. Actually, more than 6 damage. Apparently, the poison damage hurts a lot more than I thought it did. I thought that dealt an equal quantity, so with poison... Oh, it doubles when attacking. I thought it just dealt that in extra when you fight poisoned enemies. Yeah, that's bad. And so It's Billy Up might die tonight. Millibrat might die tonight. But that's okay because we're at the end of our impressions video. Doesn't really matter that much. So let's get to it. This is a game that I like a lot. And so I'm just going to leave the video footage running right now. And we can check it on out. People are wounded. So it's a 50-50 shot when they're wounded. They might live, but they might die. Actually, it looks like they lived. And so that's good. That's nice to know. I'll go after some treasure while we talk about the game. So Thea is to Civ games what Warcraft 3 kind of was to real-time strategy games oh so many years ago. The development team has created a world where you can tend to some light civilization-type gameplay while at the same time stretching your legs in a randomly generated world full of treasures and random encounters. During my time that I spent with Thea, I actually came to really enjoy the game. I'm a huge cynic about stuff like this because usually they have a big learning curve and I just really don't feel like jumping through the hoops. However, during the time I spent, I found that I really like the artistry and just the general representation of the game. Obviously, the world map and the city screens are fairly standard stuff graphically, but it's apparent that a lot of love and care were put into the character portraits and onto the card animations. As far as the combat is concerned, it is functional, and while not altogether graphically explosive, it's a card game, you know, so I didn't really expect much from it on that end anyways. As long as the cards look good, you've got a good TCG, and as long as the mechanics work. The options available in the game are pretty expansive. I mean, everything is customizable from your crafting to your characters to like research loadouts and all those sorts of things, and it can actually give you a pretty large amount of variation as you play the game. You will occasionally have like these big micromanaging spells where you'll be sitting around moving stuff around in your adventurers, but I mean, that all comes down to equipment allocations and how much you enjoy them. I really enjoy kind of messing around with equipment, so it worked really well for me. All in all, I think I've played around 5 to 7 attempts at the game so far, and it's totaled around 8 hours of gameplay. And each time, I've gone out of my way to play a little differently from before. And thus far, it actually appears as though the balance is fairly well kept, regardless of the play style that you select. However, blunt weapons seem to outshine or outsmash, outcrush, whatever, a lot of the other weapons. Replayability really seems to have been the focus for Thea's development, and it shows throughout all aspects of the game. The only thing that I actually didn't really like with this game was the combat system, but that's because I actually don't like trading card games at all. There's nothing inherently wrong with the card battle system, so in fact, I'll say that it's well designed, it's deep, and it's rewarding, but because of my bias against TCGs, I just found myself auto-resolving a lot of the combat simply to avoid it. So once again, I just don't like trading card games, but I can recognize my bias, and I can tell you that it is a good trading card game. It's just that I don't like them in general. So there it is. Thea is currently on sale for $20 on Steam, and given how slow indie games are right now in the industry, I'd say that if you enjoy Civ-type games and you want a little bit of roleplay flavor thrown on in and a huge amount of replayability, Thea's a pretty good call. It's been technically stable for me, not a single crash. It's been pretty, and most importantly, it's been a whole lot of fun over the last week. The final point that I put on it is that you could really tell that somebody put a lot of love and care into the game, and so honestly, I really have no problem stamping my seal of approval on the game or my recommendation on Thea the Awakening. My name is Splattercat. Thank you for joining me here at the Nerdcastle for the next episode of Weekly Indie Newcomer, the weekend series where you and I sit down for a little while and take a look at an indie game that I've been playing over the course of the last week. This week was Thea the Awakening. You can find a link for it down below if you wanted to get the game for yourself. I will see you all next week. Hi to everybody.